I know some of the Optio note holders, and I haven't told them any of this because it was just private until right now. How do you solve a problem for a billion people?
Solving a problem for a billion people is really how any billionaire exists. So I want 1,000 apps that are integrated to where we're creating value and injecting value where value doesn't already exist.
Yeah, Jedari helps be a big piece of that because our goal is to have thousands, if not tens of thousands of apps.
Our audience, the people that are taking in this show and going, what's going on? They're going to love this discussion.
And they don't know it's coming.
I love that.
This is the show for forward-thinking entrepreneurs who want to use blockchain and AI to disrupt and dominate. Today, Bryan Ferre meets with founder of Jedari, Greg Anderson.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You know what's crazy is you and I go back a long ways. Like, we've been friends for a long time on social media, and then we kind of just didn't talk, and then all of a sudden we ran into each other and off we go, right?
Yeah, it was pretty interesting. Somebody was introducing me. They're like, oh, hey, you need to talk to Bryan. And they sent me a text and we pinged, and I was like, well, wait a second.
Yeah.
And then you're like, dude, we've known each other for years.
Yeah, you know what's funny is I have that happen a lot.
Yeah.
Just the other day, I had a guy call, or he texted me, and he's like, I want to introduce you to my partner. And we were on the Zoom call for 20 minutes before I realized that I've known this guy for 20 years. Like, it was crazy. It happens all the time.
You think it happens because we're getting a little bit older? You know,
I
we're
think
just in
maybe,
a circle.
But I also think that, and this will be a little bit out there, but I think that I've said that my path to the Optio blockchain is everything that I've ever done.
Yeah.
Is coming together, all of my skills, all of my knowledge, everything is coming together. And all of a sudden, all these serendipitous relationships are popping up again. Like, it's crazy.
Cool.
So I'm excited to have you on. I think this is going to be a really cool conversation. I would love to start with you just kind of telling us about you.
Yeah. Well, Greg Anderson, right? From Utah, grew up LDS family. The explanation that I try to get is we were 3 times broke, like personally, like financially. Our family got divorced, and then mentally and emotionally, just we weren't taught around money. We weren't taught around skill sets of wealth and these things. So I just learned everything that I knew from MTV. So my whole life growing up, I was like, oh, how do I become James Bond? Or how do I?
Right.
And it was the money and the flash and the cars. I didn't know anything else other than, oh, that's what success would look like. So my whole upbringing and in life, especially when my high school guidance counselor told me, Greg, not everybody's meant for college. I was a dyslexic kid that just didn't, my grades suffered. I just didn't understand the way that traditional education taught. And so I was just quiet and learned charisma and sat in the back and became friends with the teachers and became aides to all the classes because they just wanted to see me graduate. And it kind of taught me that in order to be successful, I had to learn how to learn differently, understand information differently. So you mirror, hey, you're not meant for college, to, hey, I'm supposed to look like James Bond or I'm a failure. It kind of gave me these like dualistic growing experiences.
Right. Yeah, you know, I say all the time, and I probably have a portion of my influence circle, if you will, that think that I shouldn't say this, but the most valuable thing I achieved in my life so far was dropping out of high school. Like, and the reason I say that is because when I did, I realized I'm not going to be a doctor. I'm not going to be a lawyer. So I better figure out how to be an entrepreneur because I'm not going to get that, right?
Right.
I subsequently went back to college and graduated with a perfect 4.0, but it took me a lot to do that, right?
Yeah.
So I think we should value those experiences. I think at the time we don't, but as you know, you and I are getting older, we look back and we go, gosh, that was the most valuable thing ever. My wife and I, this is off the subject, but my wife and I the other day, we got 2 teenage boys. Yeah. And we're old. Like, we're way old for teenage boys, which means we have no patience. We have no, you know, and both our boys are doing life exactly the way I did it, right? Like, they don't go to school, they don't do their homework, and my wife is freaking out about it. She's like, what are we going to do? And I'm like, nothing. We're going to teach them how to be entrepreneurs because that's all they're going to have, right?
Yeah.
So I think we should value those things. So
Yeah.
So you're on the show today to talk about Jedari. I'd like to know tell us all about it and how it came about.
Sure. Jedari means Jedi level technology wrapped in the elegance of Armani. I picked this up about 5-6 years ago, thinking one day, you know what I really want? I want tunic level like Jedi clothes that's designed like Armani. I want to go to a black tie event with that. And one of my friends is like, oh, I got your brand name. And then when this software circled back around, I was like, oh, that's why we've had these names for so long.
That's cool.
Basically what Jedari does is Jedari serves elite community-driven brands. It means there's a level of content creators, and a content creator could be a musician, a podcast, a professional sports channel that says, hey, at a certain level, everything that I can do on social media is great. But there's a certain group of my fans or my super fans that I want to bring into my own environment. I want it to be my iOS and Android application, my websites. I want all the branding around me. And if I charge for access, I want it to be connected to my bank, right? My credit cards. And so all of social media is amazing. But there's another level of content creators that are being developed as we went through all the shadow banning worlds, where that content for business, we were designed so that I could go to any community-driven company and say, I can give you all the coolest tools that you can get on social, but you own it.
Right.
And there's no narrative to that platform. And the route that we got here was interesting. From about 2010 to 17, I was a lead generator. And what that meant was there were professional coaching companies around the world. In fact, we just watched the inauguration of President Trump the second time. He used to own a coaching company called Trump University.
Yep.
Well, we would provide leads to their call floor that they would call and say, hey, so-and-so's name, you just spent $97 on a product, and we would like to mentor you, and they would upsell them. I did this across the nation. We were really, really successful at it. But I ran what I call a 95-5 business. It means 95% of it I felt great about. 5% was like, I don't have a lot of customer complaints, but it just doesn't feel good. And I was going through a moment in life. I hit that MTV, thing, and the Ferrari and the limo, and it was fun, but it wasn't fulfilling.
Yeah.
And I started picking up meditation. I created a couple men's only personal development brands. I studied spirituality and meditation on a bunch of different continents about the same time we met.
Yeah.
And then there was a moment where I went through this experience and I'm like, what I'm trying to learn is how do I unlearn everything that was taught to me? Like, how do I unlearn what money is worth? How do I unlearn, what it means? As an example, just a made up story. You could be 8 years old sitting at the kitchen table and your dad walks in and says, hey, the Jones that live 2 doors down? I think they're going through a divorce. They don't have enough money and they're separating. And so your little mind goes, oh, if I don't have enough money, I'm not going to be loved. And then 6 months later, mom says, did you hear about the Thompsons? The ones around the corner with the big boat and the big house, they're getting a divorce. Just goes to show that money doesn't solve all problems. And your little brain goes, oh, if I don't have enough, I'm not loved. If I have too much, I'm not loved. And for the rest of your life, you'll go between not having enough and almost successful before you burn it to the ground. And I was trying to figure out, how do I get rid of this? I basically sold all the things. I moved to Mexico. I spent 3 years in and out of the jungle studying with the Mayans and different cultures and teachers while I was down there, learning about government systems and how do they manage their cultures for so long. And while I was down there, I basically just unplugged. I would come back into the States about once a month and do the business I needed to do here, and then I would go back into jungle. And it helped me unwind. And while I was there, I go, I had this fantastic idea. Every time I travel around the world, I get introduced to a new group of people. They're like my soul family. Mm-hmm. And then I go home. Within 3 or 4 weeks, we lose touch. And anytime we try to hold like a prayer or a meditation or something spiritual in nature on Facebook, it's like holding a prayer in the middle of Walmart.
Right.
You have trolls opening it up, and it just doesn't feel good. So I built a product which doesn't exist anymore. This is the precursor to Jedari, which only allowed, it was an Android and Apple application. It only allowed people to open it and live stream prayers and meditations together as a group. It's totally free. I'm like, this is my contribution to the world. We're going to solve this thing by studying the Maharishi effect. Just people can study that a little bit later. But a year into it, 1,000 meditations and prayers that were, some were pretty large, some were small. I'm closing the doors. And I couldn't figure out why. In my last year down there, I had a 14-hour day meditation practice. And about halfway through, I just got hit with the information. I didn't design it for anybody to make money. There was no way that that retreat center or that person in a third world country that was holding an event that had this really beautiful power and energy to feed themselves. So when they got hungry, they stopped using the platform. So I'm like, I'm not going to create anything else unless it feeds people. And at this time, about 2019, a friend of mine called and he said, hey, I have a problem. I'm running a one-to-many group coaching company. So I speak once and everybody tunes in. I'm running on a secret Facebook group, which means I have to sell my product on a landing page that's not connected. There's no business integrations. I don't really know who's paying and who's not, but I think I'm doing really well. There's 1,000 of them. Right. And can you help? So I took some products off the shelf and rebuilt his company. And what we found, it wasn't 1,000, it was a little over 600. There were hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars in uncollected billings. And I kind of hodgepodged and built something. And we instantly 3x'd his revenue because it was all in one place. And in that moment, there was a conversation at first where he's like, will you build this? Like, there's a lot of tools that I need. Do you want to partner on this? I was like, no way. I don't want to build another software.
Right.
It's a lot of work, as you know.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I got talked into doing that. And what I looked at is I said, I could take all the coolest things of social media and Zoom and Stripe and learning management system. I could take them all and I could privatize it for private businesses, whether they're a network marketing company that wants to hold their people in their own groups and have no connection between any other clients, or I could be a stem cell doctor who can't speak in general public because the FDA will come after them no matter how true the information is or not. And so I took that moment to re-engineer my past life of only making money to my altruistic life to nobody made money, including me, to saying, okay, great. Now I can build a media distribution communication platform that's designed for communities that want to tribe down off of social. They still use social, but there's a moment where you're like, I have 200, 500, 20 million people that I want to cultivate all of their content and their communications. And so that's where it kind of evolved from.
No, I love that. I think I told you this once before. I have gone on my own walkabout journey. It didn't involve going to Mexico for months on end, but I think we all, as we go through life, we have these moments that just wake you up and sort of change your paradigm. And I've had several of those. In fact, when I met you several years ago, I had just gone through the most traumatic experience of my life. And that is what brought me to blockchain ultimately, right?
Yeah.
And you and I have talked a little bit about sort of where tech is going. I think that one of the biggest sort of transformations that's happening right now is users of applications are realizing that they have given all of their most valuable asset away over the last 15 years. And as you know, I was involved in the recent acquisition of Parler, and we're building out a blockchain that is designed to do exactly what you just talked about.
Yeah.
It's sad to me that we didn't exist when you had your prayer and meditation app, because we could have gamified that. We could have rewarded the users with what we have today. So Jedari is going to integrate to the Optio blockchain. Talk a little bit about why you decided to do that and what you hope to get out of it for your users.
Sure. Well, I'm going to throw a plug into something. I don't know who this person is. They're not on our platform right now. But if somebody wanted to open a prayer and meditation application utilizing Jedari and it's integrated on the blockchain, on the Optio blockchain, they just do what I did. I was just the test dummy that went first to say what would have to happen in order for this to work. So it's not that we couldn't have it. We could today, right? The conversation came back around about blockchain and optimizations and then gamifications, where I started having the conversation with the Parlor teams and learning about the rebuild and kind of the restructure and the purpose behind it. And we come from a same premise. The way that Jedari is existed, we don't stand and say, hey, we're freedom of speech based, but we are by design. Right. It's just who we are.
Yep.
And so as I started having the conversations, I was like, oh my gosh, like, yes, like banking, and yes, server sets, and yes, all of these technologies that were designed to not allow somebody else to come in one day and
Turn you off.
Yeah. Even the way that we designed our underlying architecture, 4 clicks of a mouse, 2 hours later, I'm running in a different country, no matter how many users I have.
Right.
And the sad part is we have to think about that.
Yeah.
Right.
It's very real.
Yeah, it is. And if you're not, you're missing these giant red flags in your company because we just don't know that it's possible. But once you've been through something a couple of times and you're like, oh, well, what if that bank decides they don't want me to do business with that client? Or what if those servers do these things? And so we're having the conversation, and they introduced to me the concept, or the underlying concept, of Optio, which when we started talking again, I was like, man, I'm built on the same type of technology. We're built for the same premise. I have all of these brands, and our design is to add more and more and more users, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hundreds of thousands, millions, tens of millions of users in all different kinds of genres. Well, if you're doing that, why don't we just integrate on top of that, do the exact same kind of gamifications and reward systems you're already doing, because then that just accentuates and expands not only the market awareness, but it gives us the same type of tools that you already built.
This episode is sponsored in part by Parler, the social media platform built to champion free speech. Parler, real people, unfiltered voices, true freedom. Download it today from the App Store.
I'm going to go a little sideways here, and then I'll bring it right back. So not long after I met you, and I have a very similar background to you, right? I grew up here in Utah, and then I left Utah, and I literally left everything that was Utah for a very long time. Right after I met you, I went back to school, got my master's degree in spirituality, really. It wasn't designed for that. It was actually a health and wellness degree, but it brought me to this place where I no longer see the world through the lenses that I saw before. Yeah. And one of the things, and I think you and I share this vision, one of the things that Optio was created to do is to bank the unbanked, to create financial opportunity where financial opportunity doesn't exist today. And I think through our joint efforts, the efforts of Parler and the efforts of Jedari, I think that it's really going to make a difference in people's life. It's really going to make an impact, right? So when I talk about the future, and I'm 55, how old are you?
49.
Yeah, so we're not that far apart, but yeah, I'm on the downside slope of life, right? And when I think about the future, for me, I'm thinking about the future of my grandkids and their kids, right?
Yep.
And I envision a new world, a new feature, a new way of thinking. And I think that as odd as it is, you and I are on the leading edge of that, right? Because when we talk about free, everybody loves the idea of freedom of speech. Mm-hmm. Very few people, I think, have actually thought about what does that mean, right? For me, it's the freedom of expression, but more importantly, when you have the ability to share your ideas in an unfettered way, you're contributing to this, what I call the value pool, right? The value pool used to be labor. Mm-hmm. Like before the Industrial Revolution, it was all about labor. And as we went into the Industrial Revolution and we had this new concept of high finance where you could leverage money, where money could make money, it created this culture, and you talked about it a little bit from your upbringing, it created this culture of around the idea that money is freedom. And money is not freedom in any way. In fact, if money is freedom, that is the new slave owner, right? The slave owner is the money. But what money does, and I heard Mr. Wonderful say this once, and Mr. Wonderful and I probably are not too like-minded, but I heard him say that money is not the key to happiness and success. Money is the key to the things that create money or create happiness and success.
Right.
And really that comes down to freedom. When you have economic freedom and you have the freedom to share ideas, now you've got true freedom. So when we look at what's happened in our country over the last decade, we have surrendered so much of our freedom, but it wasn't the overt freedoms that we gave. It was the covert freedoms, which is the freedom to access my mind, right?
Yeah.
I have said for a very long time, dating back really to the beginning of Facebook, the danger of Facebook is not that they take my data and sell it. The danger is that they use that data to access my mind.
Right.
And I think for both of us, that's really the mission is big tech should not be accessing my mind, but rather I'd like to connect with the Mayan community and learn from them, right?
Totally.
So where do you see the future of Jedari? What's the growth trajectory?
Yeah.
How first of all, how can I help you achieve that? But more importantly, where's it going? What do you want to do with it?
I see a world sometime in the future where you're setting up with the big tech giants, right? Could be Google, it could be Parler, it could be Facebook and TikTok and whatever else. I see a place where we're sitting in the center of all of that, and we're never competing with a social media platform. That's why Parler and us, we fit so well together,
Right.
because it's not about, I'm not trying to give everybody a social media network, and I'm not trying to compete with free markets. We're saying, hey, once somebody wants to consume your content and pay you money for that, then own that in your own environment. So I see a place where we sit in the middle of that and say, wow, we became the most privately owned media distribution station or platform on the planet, because it wasn't about my media. It's not about Bryan's media. It's about the community's media, whether it's 10 people or 10 million people, where they're controlling what their conversations are and their narratives are and what they're releasing to their communities. It's circling back to something you said. One of the things that I remind new clients that come on board, like, this is yours. You're in control. So
Right.
you're looking, if somebody's being a troll or they're posting something they shouldn't be, this is on you to correct those. 'Cause
Right.
just don't break any laws, don't sell kids, don't do
Right.
those things on our platform, because we're searching for that. But outside of that, this is what your narrative is. So I see a place where all of those major communities finally go, oh, now I have a voice. And if I want to have ads on their networks, it's their ads,
Right.
or it's the people that they want to bring in. Because one of the things that happens on the big network out there is, if I create a massive group, Facebook knows what I'm talking about, and they're selling all of my clients' data to everybody else that wants to
Right.
find somebody about that topic.
Right.
Well, man, you spend a lot of time, effort, and money building that. So
Yeah.
why don't we stop giving out not just our content, but all of our attention?
Attention.
Yeah. So
yeah,
let's see a
I've
place
said
where we're
attention
there.
is the most valuable asset on earth.
Yeah.
Because gold, if we weren't here and we didn't care, gold would be just another rock.
Right. Right. Absolutely. And so it's the attention and the driving of the attention we watched over the last, few years, information about vaccines and all this stuff. And depending on either where you lived or where you watched, your mind was completely programmed. Somebody said this the other day. They said, there's a reason they call it television programs.
Programming.
I was
Yeah.
like, whoa.
I was
You're
just going to
blowing
say
my
that
mind.
a few minutes ago. It's interesting that we call television programming. When we go to college, we have to select a program. Like, it's all about programming. And quite frankly, everything in life is about programming.
100%.
My wife just today sent me a little video that she got, probably on TikTok. I don't know where she got it, but it showed the contrast between what it's like to be dating and what it's like to be married. And because she and I talk about this all the time, because when we were dating, we had fun. And now we're married, and it's like, I don't like this. It's not fun anymore, right? But that's programming.
Right.
She and I talked about it I don't know, been several months ago, we're programmed in such a way that we assume that it's supposed to be a certain way, right? Like you get married, now this is how you're supposed to act. You're not supposed to do these things anymore because now you're married. And it's all just programming. I think if we could unprogram the world, and I actually think that's what's going to happen over the next 20 years with blockchain, with the freedom, all of that is going to unprogram the world. And I've said this so many times. When you travel, you and I have traveled a lot, and we've been around the world, and you meet a new culture, the programming is what made them who they are and how they are.
Right.
And I think the power of AI, blockchain, and decentralization is gonna change that whole landscape.
Yeah. There's a concept that for anybody that might not, when they hear the word programming, and we're talking about it like it's second sight to us, because man, I spent my life trying to unprogram what they told me. There's this concept that every person on the planet was born with the same thing. We were born and our brains knew nothing. Our bodies knew how to operate and grow and eat, use the bathroom. But if I were born in China, my dialect, my language, my information would be completely different, even if I was born into this specific body, right? And every culture, and even multiple cultures, like there's this crazy story. It's not true, but just imagine that, you grew up somewhere in this farm out in the middle of nowhere, and you had your family and you have your grandfather, and your grandfather is the one that taught you about colors. And he taught you that the color purple was
red,
blue, or whatever the thing is. Like, look at that purple sky. And then you introduce yourself into a city, Salt Lake, New York, and you're like, man, that's such a beautiful purple sky. And everybody's like, you're crazy, that's blue. But to the human mind, it didn't know that.
Right.
And so anything that we could know could be totally wrong. I love knowing that now, because I'm like, I think I'm pretty smart, but I could be 100% wrong on all of it. And that's okay.
So there's two of these. And it's fascinating. So, and I have no idea if it's true. I've read the study. So, when Christopher Columbus was approaching the Bahamian Islands, there were people living there, and all of a sudden, these people are on the beach, and all of a sudden, there are men walking out of the water, which is why they believed that they were gods, because they were coming out of the water. And there's this fascinating study about why they saw these men coming out of the water. And it was because the Bahamian people had never seen a ship. And so because they had never seen one, and they had no frame of reference for what a ship is, they couldn't see the ship. But they could see the men coming from the ship. And so they did this. So that's a famous story that the islanders never saw the ships. So there was a group of scientists that did this study where they landed an airplane on a back country road, and they had farmers that were on the road, and the farmers couldn't see the plane because they had no frame of reference of an airplane landing on the farm, landing on the road. They literally couldn't see it. Now, the reason I say that is you and I think that way, right? We think about how do we actually manifest reality? How does reality come to be? And part of our problem today is we are still manifesting the same reality that has been manifested for the last 150 years because of our programming, because this is the way it's supposed to happen, this is the way it's supposed to be. And I think minds like yours and mine and maybe Joe's, and the thoughts that we're putting into this tech, and if we do it for the right reason and with the right incentive, which that's the problem with Facebook. Facebook's not evil. Facebook, those guys that run Facebook, they have a legal fiduciary responsibility to figure out any way possible to make money for their shareholders.
Right.
That centralized concept is the problem. It's not that they do those things, it's that they have to do those things or they go to jail, right?
Sure.
But decentralizing everything makes it so we can actually give tech to the people, incentive to the people, and freedom to the people.
Yeah.
And that's why I think what we're doing is so it's out there. Like sometimes I'm explaining it to people and they're like, dude, why would you do that, man? You're not going to make all the money. It's like, I don't need to.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. I love it. I love the concept that we've been talking about on the Optio blockchain and the integrations that we're doing. We have many clients and they all operate independently.
Yep.
And so for us, we build the technology to make it work for anybody so they don't have to, right? That's integrations and things like that. And that conversation comes back to is if we're both doing something that we truly love, you're doing your part, I'm doing my part, and there's a way that we can work together, and there's a way that we can take what I have to offer, which is clients and eyeballs, and what you have to offer, which is blockchain and tracking mechanisms and tokenizations and those, and we can offer them together. There's a world where all of us got what we wanted, and including the Optio token holders themselves, because they're saying, hey, what I really love is to see expansion. I'd love to see more applications adopt this, platform. I'd love to see a musician in Asia that's got 80,000 paying members getting tokens.
Yes.
That type of a thing. And so this whole world right now, I'm going to circle back to something you said a while ago where, people are popping back up and they're like being attracted back to the scenario. Because I believe that a lot of us have been on this path going, how do I impact more people? While I was in Mexico, the thought was, the next billionaire isn't selling a billion products. It's how do you solve a problem for a billion people?
Right.
And which is that what's brought me into social or into the community management. We don't really say that we're social media, but I looked at social media and said, hey, what can we do to serve people that aren't being served currently? And this is kind of where we come back, and we're going to probably find dozens, if not hundreds of companies that have been building things for years that you're just like, oh, hey, you've been building that? That's super cool. I've been building this, and this is how we work together.
Yes. Yeah. And I love what you just said. Solving a problem for a billion people is really how any billionaire exists, right? I love the way Steve Jobs always talked about Apple. Steve never talked about the business. And quite frankly, Steve, when he passed away, was probably the poorest billionaire that we have, right? And he probably should have been the most wealthy. But when he talked about his products, it was not, he never talked about the technology. He never said, our product has the best lithium-ion battery. What he said is our product makes your life easier and more entertaining and more productive. And he solved problems for people, and he solved problems that most of us didn't even know that we had.
Yeah.
Right? And he created problems as well, right?
Sure.
We can't, where's my phone? Right? Like that, to me, that's a problem. But But yeah, I think, and I'm just excited for Jedari being a part of this, and like you said, I want more than 100 apps. I want 1,000 apps that are integrated to where we're creating value and injecting value where value doesn't already exist.
Yeah. Well, Jedari hopes to be a big piece of that because our goals is to have thousands, if not tens of thousands of apps. Of course, they're all built by us and managed by us, so you might see them as one, but really
I see them
thousands
as,
with millions.
Yeah.
That's the part of it. And there's a concept which I love, which is the first thing I get to do is solve the main problem. Like you solved a problem, you created a blockchain. And we're like, great, that's problem number one. Problem number two, we take a look and see what's the next greatest product or problem. And we solve that and we make sure that we monetize that as well.
Right.
And then we solve the third problem and the fourth problem and the fifth problem. Now you have multiple streams of income coming in and it's all being managed in an easier ecosystem so you can just plug people in.
Yeah.
That was the premise of Jedari because most people in the content space are pretty disjointed. They're saying, hey, go use WhatsApp for this, Facebook for this, Stripe for this, Zoom for that. And we just said, well, what if we just put it all into one thing?
Yeah.
So you just turn it on and click the button and it live streams to all of your people. You don't have to go do these things. And I'm sure I've never built a blockchain, but I'm sure it's something very similar where you're like, it's all of these different types of tools. We're just building it to make it easier to on-ramp more for whatever that purpose is.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, listen, man, I am just really happy that you came today. I know that your time is valuable, and I'm excited about the future. I think what we're doing is really cool. And I'll tell you, our audience, the people that are taking in this show and going, what's going on? They're going to love this discussion, and they're going to be really excited about it. Thanks for coming.
Absolutely. I'm excited for them to hear it and just see we've been working on this for a little bit under wraps, and it'll be great. I know some of the Optio holders and some of the note holders, and I haven't told them any of this because it was just private until right now.
Yeah.
They're going to be pretty excited because they're also Jedari clients already.
I love
and
it.
they don't know it's coming.
I love that. Well, thanks again.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
This episode was sponsored in part by the Optio community. Learn more about the Optio blockchain by visiting optio.community.